Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. Let's start our video with a story about another crazy customer. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. I am the manager. Will I need to call the police? Back in the mid-90s, I was working at a Little Caesars Pizza. One day, a customer walks in, and I started to head up to the front counter, but quickly noticed that another employee was also headed that way. Knowing that she could handle it, I went back to what I was working on. Couple minutes go by, and the employee comes over and lets me know that the woman at the counter wants to see a manager, so I head to the front and inquire about how I can help her. She tells me that she wants to see the manager. Now, this store had 4 managers, 2 assistants below me, myself, the co-manager, and the general store manager. Of the 4 of us, I was the only one on duty that day, so I let her know that I'm the manager. Her response was, "No, I want a real manager." I let her know that I'm a real manager and there's no one else there at the moment, but she won't have it. Keeps insisting that I let her see a manager, and after a few minutes of this, she's starting to get really upset. During this exchange, where she kept refusing to accept that I was a manager and that nobody else was available, I was finally able to figure out why she was upset. Was her order wrong? Did the employee make a mistake, or was she rude? No, nothing like that. She was upset because she was greeted at the counter by a regular employee and not a manager. That's it. That's all that happened. When she came in, she wanted to be greeted by a manager, not some lowly employee. Then she refused to accept that I was a manager. This had her so angry, she was getting ready to come around the counter and start a fight with me, and at this point, I started thinking I may need to call the police to get the woman out of the store. I never did call the police because right at this moment, another employee who was off work that day stopped by to check his schedule. He walks into the store, sees what's going on, then drags his mother out of the store and sent her away. I don't know how this crazy lady was related to any of the employees, and I never did see her again after that. I did feel kind of sorry for the employee, though, because you'd never really want to go to a place you work and find your mother having a meltdown and threatening to start a fist fight, especially over something so trivial. And our next story. Woman flips her lid at me for doing my job. Okay, our cast. M is manager, K is Karen, CF is my customer friend, OCs are other customers, me is me. This story starts on a Thursday night a couple weeks ago. I was on the late shift and one of our heavy lifter guys just got off work and came into the store with his mom to do some shopping. He gets to my register and I'm ringing up his mom's items when he tells me about this lady that was sitting in a chair we had up for auction and that he told her she was not allowed. I look behind him and say that there's a lady sitting in the chair right now. He looks and exclaims, "That's the same lady." So I finish checking them out and tell him that I'll take care of it since he was off duty. I stare at her for a few seconds before she makes eye contact and gets up to walk towards me. But another customer gets to my register first, so I ring up his stuff. Once I was done, I walk around the counter and towards the lady, and before I can say anything, she hands me money, intending to just pay for the purse she'd grabbed off one of our racks without ringing it up or anything. Me, "Ma'am, you can't just hand me money. You need to wait in line for—" Cuts me off. "Fine. Then I guess I'm not buying this." She hands me the purse and walks off. I turn my back and put the purse behind the counter so I can put it back on the racks later. I turn back around towards her and she's sitting in the chair again. So I walk over towards her. "Ma'am, you can't sit in this chair. It's up for auction. We have been—" She interrupts me by scoffing and standing up, grabbing her cart full of stuff and walking out with it. I follow her. "Ma'am, did you pay for that?" "How dare you? Insinuating that I would steal. You have such a smart butt mouth. I can't believe they'd hire someone like you." She kept rambling on, screaming her head off, calling me a smart butt multiple times, among other things. She eventually demands to speak with the owner. I say I can call my manager. I pull out my radio. Me. "Hey, M, could you come up front? We have a customer with a problem." At this point, I was trying really hard to control my voice and nerves. This woman had me pissed off, but I wasn't allowed to snap back at her. So my body was shaking with the rising pressure. My manager finally arrives, and I just point her in the direction of the customer. The lady starts back up her tirade about how I have a smart butt mouth and should be fired and blah, blah, blah. My manager tried to cut in to speak. Ma'am, she's just doing her job. She called me a thief. Do you believe her? I can't believe this place has gone so far downhill, hiring someone like that. Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. I can't. I'm waiting on someone. Who? That's none of your business. It is my business. It's my store. At this point, the lady starts back up on her tirade at my manager, and other customers are walking past us and looking at her, then at me. I guess they thought I was upset by what was happening because I was shaking. OC1. Are you okay, dear? Me. Yeah. OC2. Is she serious? She's nuts. OC1. Yeah, she's insane. She can't be serious. My manager turns away from the lady and tells me I can go back to my register, but as I'm walking away, I hear this little tidbit. The lady had turned to another customer and was trying to get them to agree with her on the situation. K. You can't think this is acceptable. CF. Lady, I'd rather be dead than talking to you. Context for who CF is. He's a regular customer who's made friends with all of those who work registers and the managers. He's the sweetest, most naive old man I've ever met, so it was both a shock and a laugh riot to hear those words coming out of his mouth. Now I was shaking with laughter and got a few more other customers asking if I was all right. I later explained to my manager what happened before I called her up, and she said if someone gets that upset and offended over being asked that, it means they probably did steal something. And our last story. Go to the tenancy tribunal? If you say so. New Zealand has some particularly predatory property managers. Their prey is university students and young families who live in bigger cities. There are stories in our news quite frequently about how poorly they treat tenants. I spent my 20s living in rental properties in Wellington. Most of the houses I lived in were super damp, mold-ridden crap heaps. They were all super expensive. They're even worse now. Fortunately, New Zealand has a fantastic tenancy tribunal who are sick of property managers preying on young people who don't have a lot of money. When I was about 28, my now wife and I found a beautiful house in a suburb called Burhampore. Close to the city, quiet area, near a bus stop, plenty of space, including a pretty garden in the back, and most importantly, not expensive. A perfect house. Just before we moved in, I took about 200 photos of the house. I'd become very weary of how easily property managers could rake a tenant over the coals for damage, garbage, etc. the previous tenant left behind. We spent a year and a half living there without incident. We had to report to the property manager that trash had been left under the house by the previous, and they dealt with it well. When we needed to install high-speed broadband, they were easy to deal with, then everything seemed to be going swimmingly. About 4 months prior to the end of our lease, I was offered a brewing job in the United States. I informed our property manager that we'd need to break our lease earlier than expected, to which she replied, "No problem. Let's arrange a time to meet." Prior to meeting with her, I researched the company's policy on moving out of rental properties prior to the agreed date. The company policy was that if a tenant broke the agreement early, then the tenant would have to pay $750 to the property manager. This was supposedly to cover the listing fee. I should mention at this point that listing properties in Wellington was not challenging nor expensive. Most properties were filled within a week. Some property managers were even expecting people to show up with cash to cover bond plus first month's rent when they were having viewings of the property. There was no way that $750 was going towards just the listing fee. When I went into our meeting, I told her that we were willing to ensure the property was cleaner than when we arrived, and also we were willing to offer an extra $200 for moving out prior to the lease ending. At that point, she showed me the company policy, which stated leaving prior to the end of the agreed lease date would mean a $750 fee for us as the tenants. I acted flabbergasted, as one would to hear this shocking news. At this point, our property manager explained to me that the tenants before my wife and I were in a similar situation and had left prior to the agreed date. I explained to her that this was extortion, and I thought it was incredibly unfair. I repeated to her that we'd offered the $200 to help relist the property and that we were willing to list it ourselves. I also said to her that it was ridiculous to think that it had cost more than $100 to list and fill the property. She explained to me, that's what the tenants before you did, paid the $750, and that's just what everybody does. To which I replied, "Just because everyone else does it, doesn't mean it's right." We argued some more and left it unresolved. On my way out of her office, she said, "If this is still an issue, you should just get in touch with the Tenancies Tribunal." With a rage of 1,000 suns and the ability to bottle emotions like a true Catholic, I managed to respond, "I'll do that." As soon as I got home, I went on to the Tenancy Tribunal website and filed a complaint against the company she represented. Within a day, the tribunal had agreed to help me and contacted the property manager. In turn, she emailed me begging for mercy. "If you agree to drop the complaint, we won't charge you anything. The owner's very disappointed, but if you leave the house in a good state, there'll be no more issues." We're not absolute trash, so of course we cleaned the place thoroughly. We moved out without paying them a dime. But the real reward came when I saw her in the city and greeted her with a big smile and a wave. I didn't think I had the power of invisibility, but she didn't seem to see me at all. The rage of 1,000 suns combined with the ability to bottle emotions like a Catholic. That made me laugh. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.